Hello everyone, it is Carol Garrison with Carol's Creative Escape. I'm an independent Stampin' Up! Demonstrator and I'm so happy to be sharing with you another fun fold card. It is an angle triangle fold card within a card. I don't really have a good name for the card fold, but I think you're going to find that it's a real fun one to create. The card I'm going to demonstrate tonight is a holiday card. And it is a simple card, but for me, it was easier to see somebody do it so that I understood the cuts that were being made. So I'm going to just point out there's two cuts that can cause you problems. And I'll point those out as I'm going through my video. And if you have any questions, be sure to leave a comment and I will get back to you to answer that question. So let's go ahead and get started. The card that I am making is this card. Like I said, it is a holiday card, but this layout is good for any card. This flap opens up, and then here's the triangle part of the card, along with the designer series paper that forms triangles. So let's go ahead, and I'm going to give you the measurements for making this card. And if you've been watching my videos lately, you've noticed that I've started making templates, and I'm just using scrap paper. And in fact, this white is actually the back of what comes with some of our designer series paper because I didn't want to waste my good white paper on this. And then I'm just making notes and writing dimensions and stuff on the back. I have found that to be a very helpful thing for me. So with this particular card, you're going to start out with a piece of 5.5 by 8.5 cardstock, and it's scored at 4 1/4. And so you're going to want to take your bone folder, which my desk, I know if you follow me this is not a shock, but my desk is a little messy right now, but I did find my bone folder. So we're going to just go ahead and put a good crease in that card. And then you're going to have a second piece of cardstock that measures 3 by 8.5, and again you're scoring it at 4 1/4, and we're going to add a crease to that. And then you're going to have a piece of cardstock that actually it's the designer series paper. It could be cardstock as well if you wanted to emboss this instead of use colored paper. This measures 4 by 5 1/4, and we will be doing a cut on that piece. And then I also have a piece of basic white cardstock that measures 2 7/8 by 4 1/8, and for me I've actually chosen to do this layer as designer series paper, and in order to save some of my paper I've done my die cut from the middle of this because it is not going to show. And then I have a second piece of cardstock that measures 2.5 by 3 3/4, and that will get layered onto this piece. And then I've also created a second piece of cardstock that I'm going to use on the inside of my card, my little card, that measures 2 7/8 by 4 1/8 as well. So let's jump in, and I'm going to show you how to do the cuts real quick. So I'm going to grab my trimmer. And the big thing is you want to make sure you've got your right blade, the correct blade out as you're looking at doing this. So the score's the lighter colored one. I'm just setting that up the side so I don't grab it. And what I'm going to do to create that angle cut, this part of the card right here, is I'm going to set my score line into the trough, the cutting trough, and then I'm just going to pivot my card until that lower left front corner is also in the trough. And so that's going to give me the diagonal cut that I want. Sometimes I find it's easier to put my cutting blade in the middle of my cardstock and just slide it up. And that piece we'll just save for scraps. So there I've got my diagonal cut. So that's the first tricky cut, is you just want to make sure you get it going the right direction. And then the second cut that can cause problems is creating the diagonal for this piece of designer series paper. Now if you have an all over design, it isn't so bad. If you are doing, I just grabbed some scrap retired designer series paper, but if you are doing a directional pattern, you're going to want to stop and just lay your designer series paper on top of your card that you've folded over. And just make sure that when you cut it, you're cutting it the right direction so that in this case the balloons are going the right way for both pieces. It's not uncommon for people to cut on the wrong side, and then all of a sudden you've got two triangles that don't work unless you flip the card this way. So the best, I'm a very visual person, so what works best for me is to simply lay my card out and then lay my designer paper on top, and that way I know exactly where to make my cut. So I'm going to slide this piece of designer paper back over the top of my card, and I know I want my cut going this way so that I have a triangle that fits here and one that fits here. And so to do that, all I need to do is take this corner and put it here in this corner and put it into the trough. So just like we did with the card front, we just want to line those two corners up. That's going to give us the perfect diagonal cut. And I shifted just a little bit, but that's all right. We're not going to worry about that. And so now you can see that I've got two triangles that work perfectly for what I've cut. Okay, that's honestly the trickiest part of this card. It really is. The rest is fairly straightforward. So the next thing we're going to do is start assembling our card. We're already there to be able to do that. And that's what I like about this card. It's an elegant card, but it's simple to make. So I'm going to add some of my seal adhesive, and I'm just going to center this so that I have an even border around all three sides. Okay, we'll put that down. And then we're going to take this piece and it's going to go on the inside of our card in that upper corner. So again, we'll take a little bit of adhesive. And I'm just going to place this so that I've got even borders on the top and the side. And now we've got our designer series paper on there. That's really all the assembly that's required for this part of the card. So let's jump on to the rest of the card. And the first thing I'm going to do is have us stamp our sentiments on these pieces. So on the smaller of the two pieces of basic white, we're going to stamp the Christmas wishes from the from the Leaves of Holly stamp set, and I use these two images for stamping my holly leaves, and then I'm just using the die cuts for the berries that go with this, and we're using the Christmas wishes and From Our Home to Yours for our sentiments on this set. And this is the Boughs of Holly designer series paper that is part of the suite that includes the stamps and the dies and the designer series paper. So we're going to just ink up our image in the cherry cobbler, and I'm just going to stamp. Actually, before I stamp, I want to make sure I've got my piercing mat because I'm using the photopolymer stamps and they need a little bit of cushion. But I'm just going to stamp it in the top center of that piece of basic white, and I'm going to set it aside so it can dry. And then I'm going to do the same with the From Our House to Yours, stamp it up in the cherry cobbler, but this time I'm doing it on the inside piece. And again, I want it centered left to right. And there we go. From our, I don't like that. I wiggled it a little bit. It got kind of blurry right at the end. Good thing we have the back side of our cardstock to fix those kind of mistakes, right? All right, so now our stamping is done, just like that. The next thing I need to do is adhere this outline of the berries onto the die cut of the berries. And again, I just used my designer series paper. I cut it right out of the center of this layer. I wanted just a little bit of the design to add some depth, but I didn't need to ink it up or anything. And I'm using some of the liquid glue, and I'm just adding little dots. You don't need a lot, but I'm adding that to the back side of the piece that I die cut. And then I'm going to attach that to the front of the berries that I die cut out of a scrap of cherry cobbler. And so those pieces are done. And then I've already stamped and die cut out my holly leaves. And that's these two pieces right here. So we're going to start assembling this card. I did, just to decorate it, I have a 3/8 inch by 3.5 inch piece of the designer series paper. And I'm just going to put that at the bottom of my card. Again, it just adds a little bit of color. This is going to on the inside piece for our card. And so I'm just putting it right, whoops, set it down before I was ready. Right like that, and this piece is just a titch long, and that is done on purpose because then I can just take my paper snips and snip off the edge that is too long, and that way I can be sure I don't have just a little bit of white showing through. So this piece I'm going to adhere to the inside of this card, and it's just centered so that there's a nice even border all the way around. And then we're going to start assembling our holly leaves. See, I had to go to the back side for that one too. So what we want to do for these is we're going to grab this piece of cardstock and we're going to layer it onto our designer series paper. I kind of like to get all of my layers built before I start adding embellishments. You can really do however you want, but for me that's kind of the step I take. So I'm adhering this piece to that, and it shows here but it doesn't show through on the rest of the card, so that's a great way to save on your designer paper if you can die cut punch out of the center of it. And we're going to add this to the front of that card, and again it's going to have just a small border going all the way around. And the last step is to add our holly leaves. I played a little bit with how I was going to do this, and I just kind of came up with a random pattern. I did choose not to pop these up on dimensionals. I found that it just added a little bit more bulk to the card. I like to be able to mail my cards and not have to worry about extra postage, but you could certainly put yours up if you wanted to do that. That's just personal preference. And so I'm just going to put these on kind of at an angle, and it's okay if they hang off a little bit because remember this card is smaller than our card base, so it is not a big deal. Now I am a huge fan of Wink of Stella, and so I am going to brush a little bit of Wink of Stella onto these before I add my berries. I think my Stella is getting empty though. Let's see if I can squeeze a little bit more. Whenever you're squeezing more onto your Wink of Stella, make sure that you're not doing it over your project, because it can sometimes blurb out a big blob that could ruin your project. So just be careful of that when you're using Stella. I like this because it does add so much flair to a card without a lot of work, and the glitter doesn't get all over everything, and it dries super fast. So all I'm doing is brushing it on and getting some glitter onto my holly leaves. Hopefully you can see that in the camera as I'm shifting it around. If not, you'll definitely see it in person. This is one item I don't want to be without in my card supply. because I do use it all the time. The next step is to just attach the holly berries. So I'm just putting adhesive on the back. And this is the piece where maybe you could put it up on dimensionals if you want. And I'm just adding it to the top of my leaves. Excuse me, nothing fancy. And of course, I need to add a little stella to this part as well. So I think I just unscrewed the wrong end here. Just a moment. Technical difficulties. There we go. Let me just brush. You can see it makes it a little darker, and I'm going right over my designer series paper as well. Excuse me. And the last step is going to be to adhere this card to this card. And basically you should be able to just center it on the card, pretty much like this. But before you add adhesive, what you want to make sure is that this is not going to keep this part from closing, and that this part doesn't prevent this part from opening, if that makes sense. But pretty much if you center it on the card, you should be good to go. And so here I go again. I'm going to keep it closed because that helps me visualize it a little bit better. And I'm going to get it centered. Make sure it's going down straight. And then I'm closing the card. And that's simple. This card is done. So quick, easy. Your card will look a little bit different if you make it for a birthday, fall, some other holiday. Colors that you use, the designer series paper, but it's a great layout for any type of fold. And like I said, I just made an ugly one grabbing any scraps of paper so that I've got a template with my measurements on it. And the last thing that I do when I make cards is I always flip it over, open it up and flip it over to the back side. And I like to stamp my, I use the limited edition stamp set, which right now is not with my supplies. I went on a crafting weekend and I don't think I got everything put back together where I had it. That's part of my problem right now, but I can show you on here. I will stamp it using the limited edition stamp set. It's got the Stampin' Up copyright on it. And that way, if I go to sell the card, because I've got Stampin' Up images on it, I've got the copyright piece and I'm not in violation of their angel policy. That policy does apply to everyone, whether you're a demonstrator or a customer. Anytime you sell a card using Stampin' Up images, you should have the copyright Stampin' Up mark on it. So that's why my go-to is this limited edition stamp set, because it allows me to quickly and easily do that. Anyhow, here you go with that triangle card front flap fold. And I hope that you take time to make this card. It is a lot of fun to make and has great results. If you have any questions, be sure to drop it in the comments and I'll get back to you on that. If you are aware of a friend who may like this fold or be interested in learning more about this fold or other folds, please be sure to share my video with them. I am trying to grow my audience, and the best way I can do that is through recommendations from those of you that already follow me. I really do appreciate your help with that part. And I will see you at my next video. Have a great week, everyone, and have fun creating this card. Bye-bye.